Hi everyone and welcome to the fourth daily critique video. So I am getting these done gradually, and this one is discussing 5 images by Jamie Rutherford of the Northumberland coast. So let's get going. So here we have 5 pretty varied images, and I will just have a look at these in Photoshop so we can scribble on them, and we'll start with this shot, which I think is of Dunstable Castle. I've not been there myself. I'm quite liking the way that this castle here appears as an island. I guess that's the headland creeping there in on the right, but it does appear as an island across the waves, which I like. And this layering effect is really good, going from a sort of shadowy wave to some white water to some more reflective water, and then to the open sea. I really like those layers coming into the image. Good sense of depth, and a good choice of focal length as well. Nice sense of compression to bring out the graphic qualities in the image. The shutter speed is well chosen as well, I think, to simplify some of the detail in those waves. I did notice that this was shot at f32, which I assume was to get that longer shutter speed, but you will lose image sharpness in doing that. So I'd recommend picking up a neutral density filter and shooting at an aperture more like f11, somewhere there. And then you should have a really sharp image that also allows you to have that longer shutter speed you're after. In terms of white balance, I can see from these crepuscular rays, even if I didn't have the raw, which I do, that the sun's still relatively high in the sky, so you would never have this this kind of warmth at this time of day. So that's not really to my personal taste, although purely from a visual perspective, warmer colours are generally more appealing, especially to the market, than cooler colours. And certainly in the history of photography, many photographers have chosen to warm these sort of fairly neutral greys that you might have on a day like this. So there's a personal choice there. There's quite a lot of sky in this image. It's almost a 50-50 between the sea and sky here. I would personally lose some of that sky. I mean, I can kind of understand why it's been included, presumably to get some of this the sky sort of broken up here at the top. But personally, I think it would be stronger if it were just cropped. So if I just drag this down to do something like this, that to me is a more graphic image, and it would be even better if there was a bit more space there at the bottom. I did just notice this little dust spot just there. So time to get the clone brush out. Right, second image, a nighttime image of Dunstable Castle, I think this one is. First thing that jumps out at me, unfortunately, is these diagonal lines here running through the lights. I assume that's just a smear on the lens that's caused that, but they sort of interfere with the sort of natural rays, I guess, that the lights are casting off the castle. I do like this conceptually. It's great to show the castle lit up at night under a massive starry sky like this. And actually, having looked at the raw file, the edit is well handled, because the highlights on the castle here, they're just tickling white as they've been edited here, but they were totally blown out on the raw file. So I think that's actually been very well done. You can see that the reflection, if I draw a point from the top of the castle to its reflection down here, is not straight. Now you can get this on a sloping beach, for example. You might get this effect, but even if that were the case, I think the castle itself isn't quite vertical, because if I quickly draw some verticals here, you can see they're all a little bit off. So I would try and make it look level by a combination of either rotating the whole image or distorting it in various ways, because I find those kind of angles quite distracting, actually. So maybe you can make that change. The white balance that Jamie selected is very cold. I actually think that works quite well with starry skies, and it's a good antidote to the light pollution that we often get in the UK. So I've got no real problem with that. I'd probably tone down these greens a little bit as well. They're just so strong. But otherwise, that's a really nice photo. Okay, so I've got 2 photos here that are actually pretty similar. I think the stronger one is this portrait frame, or more portrait frame, I should say, this empty sky at the top isn't really adding anything for me. So I'll just discuss this portrait shot. It can be difficult when you're photographing beaches finding good subjects, and this is a really nice sand pattern here. I do think that's quite nice. I should use a larger brush so you can actually see what I'm doing here. That triangular shape is really quite appealing, as is the crisscross, the natural geometry here. Quite cool that. So a good spot there. The edit is also quite good from a color palette standpoint. I actually wouldn't go in this direction myself. If I show you what the photo is like originally, you can see that many of these colors simply don't exist. And of course there's a temptation, if you have a sunset that isn't that interesting, to introduce that color artificially. Unfortunately, I really think you should just keep coming back until you've got the light that you want. Of course, that does happen relatively regularly on the UK coast. You can also see the depth of field is short of what it needs to be to get the background in focus. Again, that might be a creative choice, but for me in this particular case, I'd like to see everything sharp front to back. And lastly, you can see that we have blown out the highlights at the back there. And that creates a real problem, because you may be able to spot this color banding in the sky here. There's some sort of purpley pinky colors here, and then a sort of almost green line running through, and then blue. And actually when Jamie's come to edit that, he's kind of exaggerated that effect. So you can see this very clear posterization in this area here. Very common problem if you blow out skies, and particularly if you blow out skies with gradients like this. So you really have to hang on to those highlights. And I would have shot this as an exposure bracket myself to avoid this problem. So your darkest exposure would have been, maybe 3 stops darker than the exposure that you chose. So I mean that would be the way to handle that highlight issue. But really, I mean I absolutely hate these kind of sunset skies. If I see a sky like this, I just think, right, another day, because it's kind of just muddy colors, mustard yellows. And there's just nothing you can do about that other than try and pull it out of the bag with processing, which isn't an approach that I would take, because I do like the earning the hard yards, so to speak. Finally, let's discuss this one. So again, the color palette, the edit, it's lovely, but it's also artificial. So I'm not going to go on about that anymore. But it is successful visually. This island creeping here on the right is a bit of a distraction, but I really love this coming to a point just here, and this lovely curve sweeping through. I would say that this curve itself becomes a subject. It's such a critical part of the design of this image, and the proximity of the curve there to the edge of the frame is just too close. So I think what I'd like to see is the camera panned round so that the frame ended here, and had a bit more space on the left, just to give a bit of breathing room to the subject here. But the exposure is really nice, good texture to the water, but nothing particularly distracting. So it's got that magical feel, and a successful image. Again, it possibly looks like the highlights are getting lost and blown out here. So same deal. Definitely protect those highlights. It's better to have noisy shadows than blown highlights, but if you can, exposure bracket. So I hope that was helpful, and more to come.